Welcome to this CXO Vision interview with Frank Kim. Frank, nice to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself to our viewers, please?
Yeah, hello. Hey, thanks a lot for having me. I'm Frank Kim. I'm a fellow at the SANS Institute, where I've been teaching and writing classes for 18 years as I had other jobs along the way. I was most recently the CISO in residence at a venture capital firm where we invested in different cybersecurity startups. Before that, I was the CISO at SANS, and before that, held various security leadership roles at various organizations.
So let's start by you introducing us to the SANS Institute 2025 GCC Cybersecurity Threat Landscape Report. So what did this research kind of set out to achieve?
Well, this report is really interesting because, as we know, the GCC has a lot of unique risks given the geopolitical environment, the various regional assets that are in play. And so this was a survey, an interview of a couple hundred of various security leaders and professionals and practitioners from the region in particular, across the region, from countries like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and so on. And the idea was to give a specific view into what are the security concerns, considerations, and threats that leaders in that region are actually facing.
So the research reveals that there is a high cyber risk, but fairly low spending on detection and response. So why do you think there is this resource imbalance, and what mindset shift is required for leadership?
Yeah, that was interesting. And it would be interesting to compare with other regions in the world because I think it's just reflective of the fact that different organizations are at different levels of maturity. So based upon the industry, based upon the organization size, and if we look at the finer details of the survey, it's roughly split in between what could arguably be the lowest spending, the most spending, and a couple tiers in between. So I think that that's really a view of kind of maybe perhaps inconsistent or different priorities across the respondents and the various industries in which they operate.
So with rising of ransomware and critical OT concerns, how can organizations effectively prioritize defense strategy and talent acquisition?
Yeah, when we talk about strategy and cybersecurity strategy, it's really putting together a plan. Is where are you at now? What are your current capabilities? Maybe, as you mentioned, some organizations are going to be less from a threat response and detection perspective, maybe a little bit better in others. And various organizations across various Gulf countries, like the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority and others, they specifically say, hey, you have to have a strategy, which means you've got to have a plan. And to have a plan, which means, well, you got to follow a framework. And the good news is that the survey, the research reveals that there are various country-specific frameworks. Qatar has one, UAE has one, National Cyber Authority in Saudi Arabia has another, and these are all best practices that organizations help figure out, okay, how do you deal with, well, some of these foundational best practices, build those corresponding capabilities, and have a playbook, a cookbook, if you will, to actually follow to do just that.
So how does SANS training in security architecture and DevSecOps integrate with performance reviews to strategically close proven skills gaps?
You mentioned a couple key areas here in terms of architecture and DevSecOps. The problem, one of the challenges that we're seeing in the region and across the world is that environments are getting more complex. The technology environment's getting more complex. The business environment's getting more complex. And of course, the threat landscape is getting more complex and advanced as well. And as a result, well, security teams have to figure out how do you have a comprehensive architecture that deals with the confluence of all of these various factors. For example, in cloud, every large organization is multi-cloud by choice or by chance, on purpose because of that was a design decision or an accident via acquisition or just operating in certain parts of the world. And to not only put together your architecture appropriately, well, you've got to figure out how to use those various cloud native capabilities, which means, hey, the other important thing you mentioned is DevSecOps, is how do you put the automated pipelines in place, the corresponding automated controls. So we got to think about things from a defensible architecture perspective, a zero trust perspective. You asked about SANS training. So the SEC 530 class does that. From a cloud security architecture perspective, that's the SEC 549 class. And from a DevOps and automation cloud native security perspective, the SEC 540 class helps with that as well.
So staying on the theme of SANS training, given the top ITS OT concerns are system vulnerabilities and external access risks, which SANS training and control frameworks do you think are best suited to help professionals mitigate these risks?
Yeah, it's hey, just like good health, good hygiene is just an ongoing affair. And the trend that we've seen for years now on the security side is that a lot of these foundational best practices really help us mitigate large percentage of attacker activity. And so one of the foundational frameworks is the CIS, Center for Internet Security Controls, which is very popular in the Gulf region. Various countries have their own versions of this. Saudi Arabia, for example, has the ECC, the Essential Cyber Controls. So the class that goes into detail about that is the SEC 566 class, all about implementing and auditing the CIS controls. But in terms of these system vulnerabilities, these corresponding risks that you mentioned, this never-ending stream of issues and vulnerabilities, hey, well, we've got to figure out how to build a mature vulnerability management program. We do have a class called LDR 516 that's about strategic vulnerability and threat management that helps people build modern vulnerability management program. Now, you also asked about external access risks, and that's really identity-related items. And a lot of our classes, of course, have an identity component. As they say, identity is the new perimeter. Our cloud classes have sections dedicated to identity. But this is a little bit of a teaser. We've got a brand new class coming out in 2026, the exact date and time TBD, but it's going to be called SEC 559 that focuses on identity security and corresponding threat defense.
So we know that many organizations monitor regularly, but often under-resource response. So how do you think SANS incident response courses can actually help teams translate basic monitoring data into rapid, effective containment and eradication?
Well, when we're talking about monitoring and security operations centers, the SOC, it's a hard job. Arguably, I think it's probably one of, if not the hardest job function capability in any security program, because it starts all the way from the fingers on keyboard, eyes on glass, the analysts, the junior analysts, the senior analysts, all the way up to leadership that needs to get involved in this. So at SANS, we've got a whole spectrum of classes to help different people at different stages of their career prepare for this. We've got SEC 450, which is SOC analyst training, skills for cyber defense operations. We've got 508 as an example, which is advanced incident response, threat hunting, and digital forensics. But from a leadership perspective, it's not just the technical capabilities. Security leaders, CISOs, security officers have to figure out, well, how do you build an appropriate world-class SOC? That's the LDR 551 class. And we can do as much as we want and as we can in terms of detecting and monitoring and responding to these things from a technical perspective. But ultimately, a lot of this is a people problem, a communication problem. So that's why we got the LDR 553 Cyber Incident Management class, which is all about, well, how do you be that incident commander that drives these issues to successful resolution?
And finally, AI and cloud have created a whole new load of security challenges. So looking ahead, what three critical non-traditional security domains should GCC organizations be investing in today?
Well, you asked about three, but you already gave a two, right? Cloud is definitely the wave of the future. Many organizations are moving to cloud for a variety of reasons. But then, of course, we've got AI, whether that be generative AI, whether that be agentic AI that's going to and then we've, of course, got AI that's being used by the adversary to speed up their activities and operations as well. And, why do I mention cloud? Well, cloud is commonly the most common delivery platform for various AI services. And so when we think about all of this, it's also related to something I mentioned earlier, is that both cloud and AI, especially with these agents, identity is going to become an even bigger challenge in terms of figuring that out. Because now we've got agents perhaps operating on our behalf or operating on our behalf that we might not even necessarily know. And the trust boundary that's being crossed from an identity perspective is going to be even more important. But there's also something else that was highlighted in the report, is we know that computing is changing. It's getting stronger with GPUs in terms of the various types of chips that are being used for AI. But quantum computing is on the visible horizon, and that is going to require security teams around the world to focus on, well, mitigations like post-quantum cryptography to deal with the threat of a viable quantum computer.
Thank you very much for your time, Frank.
Appreciate it. Thank you.